morning, boys and girls, and welcome back to my classroom. I am Mrs. Owens, and I am here at Sequoyah Elementary, and I am so excited to have you back again this week. I hope that you are having a wonderful day. All right, so today we're going to have some fun with science and social studies. And so last week I talked to you about a young lady and her primary source that she created in a diary. We talked about Anne Frank and how she used that diary to write down all of her thoughts. And then later, millions of people all over the world have read that diary and learned so much about that period of time. So today we're going to talk about different types of primary sources. We're going to move forward in time just a little bit, and we're going to be talking about the 1950s and the 1960s today. I'm going to introduce you to some different women today that played a pivotal role in American history. And so today I'm going to show you a couple of primary sources that you may or may not recognize. And I want you to really think about what they could be and how they might have been used during that time. So the first one I have for you today is this black circle. Do you see this? It is a flat black circle. It has a hole in the middle. It has a little sticker label on it with some writing. And it has some ridges on both sides. It's a hard black plastic. It's kind of shiny, okay? So I want you to be really thinking about what could this be and how could it be used. I'm not going to tell you until the end of the episode today, but I want you to be thinking about that the whole time, and maybe you know what it is. Maybe you don't. Maybe you'll learn something new today. So I want you to be thinking about that. My second primary source we're going to be looking at today is this one right here next to me. It's kind of heavy, so I'm not going to pick it up much, but I want you to be looking at this, and I'll kind of tilt it so you can see really well. It has this piece that comes off with this long coil of a cord, okay? It's got some holes in both of these pieces. It's kind of heavy. It's black in color. It's got some buttons here. On the front, it has these little holes. It has numbers. Some of the numbers are kind of worn off because this one really is an old, both of them are really from the 50s and 60s. So this one that I showed you earlier is from 1957. And this one, I'm not even sure the year on it because I couldn't find a date on it, but it's pretty old. So it has some holes here, and if I put my finger in these holes, I can kind of spin this, and then it goes back to where it was. So I'm not really sure. I want you to be thinking, what could that be for? It only has numbers 1 to 0, and so you kind of spin around, and then they return to where they were. So we need to be thinking about what could that be for, and how might it have been used in the 1950s and the 1960s. And even the chair that I'm sitting on is actually a primary source as well. And so this kind of goes with this device here. So I'm going to tell you more about that at the end, but you're going to have to wait and see. All right, so today we're going to be talking about 4 women that played a huge role in space exploration in America. And so I'm going to introduce you to a few vocabulary words that you might not be familiar with before we read this book. All right, so our first vocabulary word today is segregation. Can you say that? Segregation. It's kind of a long word. So that is the practice or policy of keeping people apart based on their race or their religion or some other reason. Today, for the purpose of this book, we're going to be talking about segregation based on race. So just based on someone's color of their skin, they were made to keep separate. And so that word, again, is segregation. All right, our next word we're going to be learning about today is engineer. Anybody heard of an engineer? Can you say that word, engineer? All right, that's a person who designs and builds machines. Today we're going to be talking about airplanes and spacecraft. And so those are often engineers when they design those, when they work on those, and when they make them. And so an engineer is an important person. Then we're going to talk about aeronautics. Aeronautics, that's another big word. Can you say aeronautics? That's the study of flying. We're going to be talking about space and flying of airplanes today, and that all involves aeronautics. And then our last word that you might not be familiar with is trajectory. Can you say that? That's a really hard word, trajectory. That is the curved path along which something moves through air or space. So trajectory, if you think about throwing a ball, the path that the ball takes as it falls back down to the ground down. That's victory. So that's a really tricky word. So today I'm going to read you a book, and while I'm reading, if you hear one of those 4 vocabulary words, I want you to put your finger on your nose. And maybe that will help you remember, oh yeah, Mrs. Owens already told me what that word means. It will help you with your vocabulary, and maybe you could even use those words when you're talking with your family about the story. All right, so the story we're going to be talking about today is called Hidden Figures. And some of you may have heard of Hidden Figures, or maybe you've even seen, they've made a movie about these ladies. They are so, so neat, and they did so many cool things. So, Dorothy Vaughn, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden were good at math. Really good. In 1943, the United States was at war, World War II. That's what we talked about last week. Dorothy Vaughn wanted to serve her country by working for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Oh, there's that word. The government agency that designed airplanes. Having the best airplanes would help America win the war. Making airplanes fly faster and higher and safer meant doing lots of tests at the agency's Langley Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia. Tests meant numbers meant math, and math meant computers. Now, when I say computers, what do you think of? Like a laptop or something with a keyboard? Not the same in the 50s and 60s. Today we think of computers as machines, but in the 1940s, computers were actually people like Dorothy, Mary, Katherine, and Christine. Their job was to do math, and so they called them computers because they would compute numbers. Because Dorothy was black and a woman, some people thought that it would be impossible for her to get a job as a computer. She lived in Virginia, which was a southern state where laws segregated or kept apart black people and white people. Did you hear a vocabulary word? Segregated. That meant that they could not eat in the same restaurants, they could not drink from the same fountains, they could not use the same restrooms, they could not attend the same schools, they could not play on the same sports teams, they could not sit near each other in movie theaters, they couldn't even marry someone of a different race. But Dorothy didn't think it was impossible. She was good at math, really good. Are some of you really good at math? So she knew she was the right person for the job. She applied, and the laboratory offered her a position as a computer. So she was offered the job. At work, blacks and whites were kept apart. The white computers worked in one building, and Dorothy and the other black computers worked in a different building in their separate office. Even though they worked on the same kinds of assignments, the black computers and the white computers used separate bathrooms, and they ate in separate lunchrooms. America won the war in 1945, but Dorothy stayed on the job, still trying to make airplanes faster and safer. By 1951, the Americans and the Russians were competing to see who could build the best planes. That meant more experiments and more numbers. Lots and lots of numbers. And more numbers meant the need for more computers. That's when Mary Jackson got a job as a computer at Langley. She worked in a group that tested model airplanes in wind tunnels. A wind tunnel was a machine like a huge metal box with a powerful fan attached. Mary put model airplanes in the wind tunnel and blasted them with air from the fan. This experiment helped her group improve their designs on the models before building full-sized airplanes. Mary wanted to become an engineer, but officials said it was impossible. Most of the engineers at the laboratory were men. And to become an engineer, Mary needed to take high-level math classes. But she wasn't allowed to go inside the white school where the classes were taught. But Mary was good at math, really good. And she refused to give up. She got permission to enter the school building and take the math classes. And she earned good grades because she didn't give up. Mary Jackson became the first African-American female engineer at the laboratory. Katherine Johnson was good at math and always asked lots of questions. In 1953, she applied to the laboratory for a computer job and was placed on a team that tested actual planes while they were flying in the air. Their research was used to figure out ways to prevent future plane crashes. In one of her first projects, she learned how to analyze turbulence, or dangerous gusts of air. No one knows how many lives her work may have helped save. Pretty important ladies. Katherine wanted to help the group prepare its research reports, so she asked if she could go to meetings with the other experts on her team. Her boss told her it was impossible. Women aren't allowed to attend meetings, he said. But Katherine knew she was good at math as anyone else, maybe even better. So she asked again, and again, and again. Katherine asked her boss so many times, he finally invited her to the meetings. Katherine was good at math, really good. And because she fought to be treated the same as the men, she became the first woman in her group to sign her name to one of the group's reports. In the 1950s, the Langley Laboratory bought a machine computer. Now notice this computer is a little different than the computers you might use at home or at school. This one takes up a whole room. It was huge, just for adding numbers and calculating numbers. At first, these machines made mistakes. Dorothy learned how to program the machines so that they got the right answers. She taught the women in her group how to program the computers, too. In 1957, Russia launched a satellite known as Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. The United States started building satellites to explore space, too. For years, the laboratory had used math to design the airplanes. Now it would need math to create spaceships as well. The government decided to change the agency's name from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, what we know today as NASA. So these ladies were working for NASA. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy told Congress, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon. But the first step to getting a man on the moon was to send an astronaut around the Earth." NASA was going to need to hire more space experts and more people who were good at math. Really good. Can you think of some people we've already met? The people at the laboratory had to work together from morning to night to figure out how to send astronaut John Glenn into space and bring him back home to Earth safely. Katherine Johnson knew she could use math to help. "Tell me where you want his spaceship to land, and I'll tell you where to launch it," Katherine told her boss. Katherine helped calculate the trajectories, there's one of those words we talked about, or pathways that rockets traveled through space. She had to plan Glenn's exact route from takeoff in Florida to splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean. There was no room for error. So he would go up, and he would travel around the Earth, and then he would drop back down and land in the ocean, and someone would go out and get him. So no one was better than Katherine at solving these tricky math problems. Days before his mission, John Glenn wanted Katherine to double-check the machine computer's trajectory calculations to make sure it hadn't made any mistakes. When Katherine said the numbers were correct, Glenn was ready to go. February 20th, 1962, Glenn blasted off into space, circled the Earth, and made his way home safely. Meanwhile, laws began to change so that black and white students could go to school together. Blacks fought for the right to sit beside whites on buses and to drink from the same water fountains. At the laboratory, black and white computers started working together in the same offices, eating at the same lunch tables, and using the same restrooms. Black and white moviegoers could now sit next to each other in the same theater. Across the country, people started to think about ways to bring equality to all Americans. Christine Darden, the fourth lady we're going to talk about, was good at math, and she loved electronic computers. She started working at Langley in 1967. Christine wanted to become an engineer. And thanks to Dorothy, Mary, and Catherine, she knew it was possible. Eventually, she became an engineer for supersonic airplanes. Do you know what supersonic means? It means planes that fly faster than the speed of sound. But her first job was to help with NASA's mission to the moon. The people at the laboratory prepared for years to send astronauts to the moon, about 238,900 miles away from the Earth. Finally, on July 20th, 1969, the world watched as 3 men arrived at the moon in their Apollo 11 spacecraft. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, said astronaut Neil Armstrong when he stepped onto the dusty surface. But it was also a giant leap for Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, Christine, and all the other computers and engineers who had worked at the laboratory over the years. The moon landing was a success from takeoff to splashdown. But there was no time to rest. Once NASA landed astronauts on the moon, the people at the laboratory began dreaming of sending humans to other planets, such as Mars or Jupiter or Saturn. They started to imagine hyper-fast space planes that could travel around the Earth at 7 times the speed of sound. The next adventures wouldn't be easy and would require lots of tests and lots more numbers. But Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, and Christine knew one thing: with hard work, perseverance, and a love of math, anything was possible. So that is a true story about those 4 ladies and what an impact they have had on our country and on our science world and even in the social studies realm, our history. So today, I'm going to show you a fun experiment that you could try at home, creating your own rocket. So the materials you're going to need today is some string. You're going to need some tape, just some Scotch tape. You're going to need a straw, just a plastic drinking straw, and you're going to need a balloon. Any size balloon or color, it doesn't matter. Some optional materials, you could get some construction paper and try to decorate your rocket to make it look more like a rocket. Today I'm just going to use the balloon and straw plain just to show you how to do it. So the first thing you need is you're going to tape your string down onto something. Okay, so today for this purpose I'm going to use a chair, and then I have another a tripod essentially that will show you how high we can get the airplane to travel. Is that good? Hopefully that will work. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your string, and mine is just like a curling ribbon like you would put on a present, but it doesn't really matter. Any kind of string will work. So you're going to take your string and you're going to tape it down to one object in your house. It could be a chair or the floor. And so what you're going to do is, let me turn this off for a minute so you can see everything better. So it's not in my eyes. So you're going to take your string and you're going to tape it down on the chair or whatever you're choosing to put it down on. And then I'm going to unwind it. And cut off my, oops. I'm going to cut off the string. Now, you're going to put your straw on the string before attaching the other side. So I'm going to feed my string through the straw, push the straw through. Now I'm going to take the other side of my string and I'm going to attach it to either another chair or something else. I'm going to do this first time. I'm just going to do it flat across there. My angle it just a little bit. So tape it down. Now I just have my straw attached to my string. Now the last thing you're going to need is some more tape and a balloon. So I have some masking tape here just because I only me here. If you've got someone else to help you hold the tape and your balloon, it might be helpful. So I'm going to put my tape right there. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to inflate your balloon, but you're not going to tie it. You're going to hold it closed, but don't tie it. So here we go. Now, you can inflate the balloon as much or as little as you want, and that's something you can use to experiment with, is to see if that makes a difference on whether or not your rocket works. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the balloon, I'm going to attach it to the bottom underneath my straw, and I'm going to tape it on the top. Okay? So now, at this point, if you wanted to decorate your straw and make it look like a rocket, you could add a point to the front, maybe some tail fins in the back, something to make it look more rocket-like you could. Now, this is also a fun activity you could do if you have siblings at home or your parents. You could set up more than one of this, and you could race each other with your rockets. All right, so I have not tied this. I'm just holding it shut. So as I let go, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that it's just going to stay here, or do you think it's going to move along my line? Let's find out. So I need a good rocket countdown. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, blast off. And you saw how far it traveled. All right, so you could do this same experiment lots of ways. For example, if I were to take my string, and if I move it up to the top of my little pole I have here, and tape it again, put this back down, do you think it would work this way? Let's find out. So I'm going to blow up my balloon again. I'm just using the same balloon over and over. You can get different balloons, or you can try different sizes, different colors, see if it makes a difference. Once again, I don't tie it. I just pinch the end of it, put it underneath my straw, tape the top down, like so. Make sure it's going to stay. And then I'm going to watch and see if I let go of my balloon, what's going to happen. What do you think? So if you can give me a countdown, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, blast off. And you can see how far it went. So you can do this even up to the ceiling. Just see how far you can get it to travel in different distances. And when trying this, you can try blowing it up just a little bit, blowing it up a lot. See if that makes a difference for you and your family, and see who can get theirs to go the fastest. You could have races to see whose balloon rocket travels the fastest, or how far you can get it to go. It's just something fun to try at home, and it's a really cool thing, and that's how rockets work. We call that thrust. When you let go of that balloon, the air that comes shooting out of it causes it to go up the line, and that's called thrust, and that's how a rocket works as well. Rocket takeoff video, you've seen all of the smoke and the fire coming out of the bottom of the rocket, and that's causing thrust, which then shoots the rocket up into space. All right, so a couple things before I leave you today. First of all, I would love to see if you create a rocket of your own. I created a Facebook group where you could post pictures, or maybe you made a diary, or you made a time capsule last week with my lesson. If you did, I'd love to see a picture, and you could share it. So if you go to Facebook and type in Mrs. Owens's RSU Showcase, make sure you have Owens with the apostrophe S on the end, since I'm just one person. That's how it's spelled. And so you can look that up and join that group, and that will allow you to post pictures. And I would love to see if you and your family had the rocket experiment with the balloons. I'd love to see what you do. And it's a great place if you're a Sequoyah student, or even if you're a student somewhere else, you could still join the group and post your pictures there. All right, before I leave you today, though, I need to tell you about our primary sources from this morning. So I asked you what you thought these primary sources might be. So if I return to this one, does anybody know what this source is? Anybody used one of these at home? These are really popular in the early 1900s all the way up through the 1950s, 1960s, and they've kind of made a comeback, and they're becoming popular again. But this is called what? Anybody know? It's called a record. So if you've ever used a record, what is it used for? Anybody know? It's used to play music. So you would put this on a record player. It's like a really big CD. You'd put that on the record player, and a needle would come down, and this would spin, And the needle would run along these tracks on the record, and you would play music, and it would produce any kind of music that you had on the record. Our second object that we talked about was this one right here. Does anybody know what this one is? Some of you might know. This is a rotary telephone. So before there were cell phones, no one carried these around. Okay, this is a very heavy device, and it had to be plugged in to the wall. Okay, so you couldn't take this in your purse. You couldn't take it in your pocket. It was left at home. So back in the day, before cell phones, we didn't have phones that we carried around with us. This was at home, and so no one could get a hold of you unless you were home. So you would pick this up, and you would dial a number, and you would have to dial the number by moving your finger in the little hole and running around and wait for it to go all the way back around before dialing the next number. And if you messed up, guess what? You had to put the phone down, and you had to start all over. So this one, you would put this part to your ear, and you would talk in here, and the person on the other end could hear you. So something that you don't see around much anymore. A lot of people don't have those at their homes like we used to a long time ago. All right, and the last thing I wanted to show you is if you are looking for more about NASA or more about anything related to what we talked about today, the NASA website is nasa.gov, and they have created a whole network of NASA at home. And so you can check out the NASA website, and they are putting up a whole day of scheduled lessons every single day for students at home right now. So like today, they've got TV programming about NASA's Future Forward. They have an Earth Science video, Apollo 13, which is traveling to the moon. There's going to be some great video and footage about that. So I hope that you'll take the time to check out the NASA website. That was nasa.gov. They have a whole section for students to look at and get ideas. I've put some other books out for you in case you're wanting to read more about this period of time, or about Katherine Johnson. That's a great book, Counting on Katherine. These are all great sources for you and your family to check out and learn more about the Hidden Figures, or maybe even watch the movie Hidden Figures together and learn about this part of our history. I hope you have a great day. See you next week.